find my inner calm. I'm probably failing at it. If my children were here, Meredith, you're the youngest person in the room. Can you fix this?
No, we've had trouble with that.
So, right, yeah. For what it's worth, lest you think we're ill-prepared, I did everything the same on Thursday afternoon, and it all worked. So at this point, I don't have a mic system that's working. So if you struggle to hear me, there's some lovely seats available in the front row. I'm very kind. And I'm glad I have some handouts for you because none of this is working either. Pastor Shelley, if you want to try to make stuff up and get anything to work, I'm failing miserably. We'll see what Zach is doing. Thank you. For what it's worth, I'm working really hard on getting a tech person on stage. Is that working without feedback?
Say hello.
Well, from there on, I'm going to go. I promised we would start with an EMB hospital update without all the images to go through. We're going to have to skip that for now. I would invite... Are there more handouts?
They're on the table.
Oh, there's some right there. There's two handouts. One is sort of, they're both from my blog. So the blog address is on them. You can go to the blog address to learn more. Also, and all of this is included there. You can also, yeah, we'll go with that. All right. Yep, there's two different ones. The one with the picture of me on the bike is last week's. This one, the one that I'll be going through today, has part of the blue map of the world on the top of it. Steve, can you help me? I can't get any of the mics to work, or if you can just start with the mic and try to help me, that would be great. I can't get anything to work. All right, so I have been on staff here at Umbro for the last 18 years, and in the course of those 18 years, I've led 24 short-term mission trips to 4 different countries and all around the United States. The occasion of my sabbatical gave me a chance to really dig deeper into all of this and see if any of this was having any sort of lasting impact. For those of you who have read anything about short-term mission trips over the past, they do a lot of good. They also have the ability to do a lot of harm. And sometimes I have come back and I've wondered myself, okay, we just raised $20,000 to send 18 kids and adults to an orphanage in Jamaica. Would it have been better to send $20,000 to the orphanage, and what could they have done with those funds there? So I've been really interested in this for a long time. And so I decided I was going to go ahead and do some research. I created an extensive survey. When I did the math, trying to not rely on everything I had here. Oh, which I actually have it. You just don't have it. So that's for you, huh? Good grief. Oh, boy. Okay. So when I did the math, I took all these lists and added them together. There are 283 different people that have gone on mission trips that I've been a part of at Umbro over the course of the last 18 years. I didn't do research on people that weren't with me just because I didn't have that data. I found contact information, thank you Facebook, oh, and thank you Steve, for 268 of these folks, and I heard back from 134 of them. Thank you, Vanna. Oh, this is so much better. All right. Not surprisingly, a lot of the people that I heard back from were in their 20s or 30s, about 63% of them were in their 20s or 30s, which would make sense because so many of my years in ministry had been leading youth trips, which actually made this really interesting for me because so many of the people who were reflecting were thinking back about an experience that for many was 15 years ago. And so I actually found that to be very valuable. I asked how many mission trips that people have participated in, and it was sort of interesting. Only 15% had, see, I think we've got this feedback issue.
Yeah, some kind of like...
No, it's not. Unless it is today. It hasn't been any other day. It's something with this new projector that we're working on.
Well, just keep going.
I'm going to turn, I think is it better without? We can turn the projector off. Let's try that. It's not working anyway.
Well, I'll just leave it off.
Okay. This is late to there. Let's just turn it all off. So I thought it was sort of interesting that only 15% of the people who responded had only been on one mission trip. So that means 85% of people who went on one wanted to return again. So I thought that was an interesting thing. It doesn't mean that their other trips were here at Dumbro, but they went out in some other sort of way. I'm always wondering, why do people choose to go on these trips? Now, of course, as their pastor, I want it to be because God calls us to love and serve those in the world, and this is how we're living out our faith. But I wondered how people would respond. For those of you that know anything about moralistic therapeutic deism and the faith of our young people, I'm looking at you, Phil.
That's what they believe.
Right. So you would not be surprised to know, and this, people could choose for multiple reasons for wanting to go. 80% said because helping others is a good thing to do, and it is. 70% wanted to make a difference in the world. 60% had friends who were attending. 58% thought it was important for their faith journey, and 50% wanted to travel somewhere interesting. All right. So then I wanted to figure out what kind of changes happened as a result of these experiences. And 84% of people said that their beliefs about people living in poverty changed. And that's important for me. We do a lot of education when we go out in mission. If you go to my blog, you'll see a survey that's part 2. It's like 16 pages, so I didn't print it for you. But in that document, I pulled some of the, I don't know if I'd say best answers, but some of the most interesting reflections. Because by the time this research was all done, I had 83 pages, single-spaced, of information from these from people of all ages and their reflections. So here's what some of these people had to say about their beliefs about people living in poverty changing. I realized how unfair everything was. For the first time, I understood that being a Christian meant really painful, difficult things. Another, I grew up in a very comfortable family situation and did not know anyone within my family or close friends who was experiencing poverty. For me, the service trips humanized people in poverty and reinforced for me that poverty was not the result of laziness or someone's character. And lastly, I saw how the cycle of poverty was unending, and that the ability to pull oneself out of that was a massive feat. I also saw how God was at work in people living in poverty, that we had much to learn about God's mercy and grace, and God's desire for justice from people we thought we were there to help. 85% of participants reported that their view of the world changed. Here's just a couple I think mission trips change the lens with which you view the world. With every trip, I came to view the world with a little more compassion and grace. This one, when I served the poor breakfast, it was the poor that were working alongside of me preparing the food, serving the food and cleaning up the tables. I think the view that changed is that often those of us born into privilege serve to make ourselves feel good. The poor serve to make those they are serving feel good. For me, this was the one piece that was most fascinating for me to read about, and that was I asked people if participating in mission trips influenced their job choice or career path, knowing that many people who would have responded to the survey had long been in their career before they ever went on a mission trip, but many had not. And 1/3 of all of the people that responded said that the mission trip had a direct influence on the career choice that they chose. And that was pretty significant for me. And it was fascinating to read these things. This response came from a young man who's probably in his, I think he's 30 now, or somewhere around that. And he helps make policy in Massachusetts. And he wrote, I was recently in a discussion with a group of policymakers in Massachusetts, and the Appalachia Service Project came up organically. 3 of us had been on it and had used our experience as a useful benchmark when thinking about people who suffer institutional limitations. I found that to be powerful. Some of you who've been around for a long time know we used to send our youth through the Appalachia service projects for years and years. And this young man, this was at least 15 years later, and he was reflecting on this experience as he helped to create policy. I thought that was powerful. It was incredible for me. Oh, now I can talk louder. It was incredible for me how many people we have who are serving in the medical field who reflected on how they chose what they chose because of this. This young woman is probably, I don't know, I bet she's 33, maybe younger. She's younger. I'm in medical school right now, and I'm choosing my career specialty, and I'm choosing family medicine. My experience in going on these trips really opened my eyes to the need to serve underserved populations. My motivation to choose primary care largely depended upon what I have seen on my mission trips. After witnessing the importance of the engagement of community resources, I realized that family physicians can have the biggest impact in tackling some of these factors and making a difference on patient health. Thank you to you family med providers in the back of the room. I also was motivated to serve underserved populations to which the need of family physicians is great. And there were several responses similar to this one that the people they met in these underserved populations really directed them into a certain kind of career path. Well, this one is one of my favorites though. I'm now a sailor. I work in Japan. This is a true story. This is a young woman. Leaving home to experience new places and cultures helped to shape my curious demeanor. Strong, independent female chaperones showed me that women can safely travel. And I now chose a career that allows me to volunteer in my time off. So just really, and I'm sure it was Pastor Shelley she's talking about. This young person is now a pastor. It was part of my broader call to becoming a pastor. Not only in what I experienced myself in working in situations of poverty, but what I experienced in working with others from my church. I fell in love with working with middle schoolers and high schoolers around questions of God and faith and life while on mission trips with them. I guarantee you that was Jonathan Davis for those of you. This one was sort of interesting. 53% of participants claimed that their charitable giving had been impacted as a result of their experiences. Some of the other research that I've read on the topic did some real searching into this and found that while people reported that it was impacted, when they actually got in and did the research and the math, there wasn't any concrete evidence that there had been a change. I didn't dig that deep into this research to really find out. There were some people that said, my giving to the church has decreased because now part of my giving is going directly to those organizations that we serve with. A lot of people reflected on how these experiences were so powerful because they provided an opportunity for people to see where their money is actually going, so that giving financially became much more meaningful for them. 70% said that their faith was impacted while on the mission trip. I thought this was interesting. This person said, "Oh, how to answer this question. I guess it has both introduced and reinforced in my faith that God is on the side of the poor, that God is present in and with those who are suffering. Not that we bring God there, but that God meets us there in our suffering with those who suffer." 60% of participants shared that their understanding of God was impacted by the experience. Again, someone talking about how it actually made faith a lot harder. The trip led to a lot of uncomfortable questions, like why people are born into poverty or why bad things happen to people who are just trying their best. The fact that some people must struggle with these things that may be through no fault of their own made me grapple with the picture of God I had in my mind as an all-powerful, all-loving entity. These experiences painted a darker color over the picture of God I had and introduced complexities I hadn't been aware of before. All right, here's the next question, and I'm going to ask for some conversation around this one, because this question alone provided 9 pages of responses from people. Some people believe that it would be more effective if the money spent on travel to a mission area was simply donated to the mission cause. Do you agree? So before I tell you what I learned here, I'm going to ask all of you. I know some of you have been on mission trips before, so what do you think? Would it be more effective to take that $20,000 we raised to go to Jamaica or wherever and just send it directly to where we're going? All right, I'm going to have you turn and discuss that with 2 or 3 people who are sitting near you. Oh, here. I think sure. Yes, it would Alright, so I'm going to take a poll here in the room. And I'm going to kind of ask you to commit. So would it be better if we sent money? I'm going to ask you to say yes, no, I'll give you the unsure out, like I did for people here. How many of you would say yes?
It all depends.
Yeah. All right, let's discuss. So what do you think? What difference does it make? What should we do? What'd you discuss? Go.
Well, I was sort of thinking that probably in the short term, it would be better if the money went straight to the entity. But if you look long term, it's far better if it's being done the way it is now. And from some of the illustrations that you gave as well, there was a heavy attention to the things how policy might be changing by what's happening. So I think long-term effect, it's much better with the way we're doing it now. Short term, that might be, if you look at just a little close slice, that might be it.
Kathy,
We need interpersonal connections.
say it louder. Yeah.
We need interpersonal connections.
She was my teacher, so I know she has.
Yeah. We need to know that, they need to know that people care for them. Showing compassion is where we need to go. And by doing that, you're helping yourself more than you're actually helping the people you're helping.
That's true. Other thoughts? No.
I think we found that taking people through the entrance to Bethlehem through a machine gun garden gate that's 20 feet high is something they can't know until they've been there.
Right. Yeah.
And I would guess going to Jamaica, you've changed people's lives. We're about changing people's lives.
Yeah. That lasts a lifetime. That's one of the things that was powerful for me about this research was a lot of, I would say 80% of people tied their names to it. So I could go back and say, okay, these reflections are coming from 3 experiences in 2002, 3, and 4. So I could kind of see that lasting impact. The other thing, I read this fantastic book. I wish I could think of the title, but it really talked about how the whole, this isn't news, but the whole biblical narrative is about travel, right? And where is God encountering all of God's people? When they're on the road and when they're being pushed outside of their comfort zones, when God is saying, do this, and we've got Moses and others saying, not me, God, and then you are pushed anyway, and how much we grow in those experiences. Other insight that you talked about, Jan?
I think before I went to Tanzania, I was looking forward to sending money.
Yeah.
There's something about going, walking with, sharing your concern. Money is a gift, but it sometimes is a pretty cold gift. Going along brings that warmth, that companionship, that caring spirit. Yeah. And God.
Yeah, yeah. And I sometimes wonder too, when you think of the connection with money, okay, so we've been going back and forth to Tanzania now for like 6 years. Without those visits, without those stories and those relationships, we wouldn't have all the money that we've sent to do some incredible work. Yeah. Nice and loud. Oh, sorry. Yeah, me too.
Not only does it last for the lifetime of that individual, but it's kind of a force multiplier, because when you get back, you share those stories with other people. You may help draw them into mission work you might have done, or other things like that. And it kind of, so it's not just the trajectory of one person, but all the other people they touch when they get back, and how much it might bring other people to travel there, and give more money, and all that kind of stuff that goes on.
Yeah. Others?
I can't believe you've made that many trips.
It was a lot. It was a lot of days. I have a good supportive husband. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think anecdotally, one of the things that those broader mission trips brings to the participants is an awareness of the poverty around them at home.
Yeah.
To think about how you started out doing way away trips, and then Open Table became a big ministry. And I think what's right in front of us here that we can impact also.
Right. Right. So one of my favorite stories, Open Table certainly may have come out of that. I did my internship at Hosanna and took this group of, I don't know, probably 20 passionate people for service, ranging in age from probably 15 up to their 60s. And it was an intentional trip into the Chicago area that all focused on hunger issues. I'm pretty sure we didn't make a difference on anybody's lives actually in Chicago. Yes, our hands were probably helpful in a food line and serving lunch one day. But what happened is that group came back, and they were so passionate and they were so on fire. They wanted to find out what were the missing pockets of food insecurity in Rochester. And they realized that there was no Channel 1 agency on the north end of town at this time. So then that group of people formed a team. They opened up Hosanna's Pantry, which is open 1 or 2 Saturdays a month at the north end of town so that people who live in that region can come and have access. And sometimes you don't get that passion until you go and you learn elsewhere. Yeah. Other insight. There was lots of conversation. Yeah.
I've not gone on a Zumbro mission trip, but the work I've done in my career and just, things in the community, working with particularly people in poverty, or people from other cultures, is I think sometimes we do these things and we think we're going to bring God to them. And what I've discovered is God's already been there. I mean, God is there and has been there a very long time.
We asked her pride.
Exactly. And so it seems to me this sort of thing might happen on a mission trip, that you discover that God is already there at work. And you meet God in the faces of the people that you serve. That's my guess.
Yep. Yeah. I think that happens. I see it happen all the time. I've said for many years, I pour so much time and energy into planning all of these experiences that you'd think that I would learn, but I don't, that at some point I'm going to be needing this experience too and be reminded, oh, this is why we're doing this. And here's God with this incredible lesson and world to open up. Yeah. Other thoughts, Ben?
I think from the perspective of a congregation, it also goes from when we sending money, you're basically it's a line item, and it goes when you're sending people, it becomes part of your story, part of your narrative as a church, and part of each of our narratives, and part of our identity, and that people are reflecting on. And it affects us our whole life long, and also affects our identity as a church and how we become passionate about all of our missions.
Other thoughts? I'm going to twist it a little bit. Have any of you ever heard of or been a part of a mission trip where you felt like there were some negative effects of that work? I read a study about a church, I can't remember where it was, somewhere in maybe Colombia, where this one church had been painted 10 times in the summer. These really well-meaning white Christians from North America would show up and they would paint the church, and then they would feel good about themselves and go home.
It's real thick paint.
Yeah, it's some big paints. I don't think we've ever been a part of that, but I know, anyone in here ever go on an ASP mission trip? Yeah, oh, there you are, Leslie. So, the ASP is Appalachia Service Project, where you go into some of the poorest rural areas of the United States and do home repair work. And so, I'll never forget, one of the first mission trips that I led was probably somewhere in Kentucky, and we were at Mr. Phillips' house. I was 22 years old. My sister was my co-leader. She was probably 19. And we had a group of 5 sophomores in high school, and our job was to build a a ramp to Mr. Phillips' house so that when the ambulance crew had to come off the gate, we could go up. And we actually did it, whether or not it was long-lasting, I don't know. I will never forget. I use this story all the time last year with my son who was in geometry, because we were trying to figure this out, and Michaela Hagan, who grew up here at Zumbro, said, Lisa, we learned about this in geometry, and she took all of her book smarts and we applied it to building this ramp up to Mr. Phillips' house, and we did it. I had no clue how. I learned how to use a circular saw and all sorts of things. Now, much to my husband's displeasure, I've gained a lot of life skills and have rewired most of our house. I'll never forget when this is a random side note, I'm good at those. That's what happens when you lose your guide here. I was probably like 8 months pregnant with our first child, house because I was rewiring all of the outlets in the nursery. And my husband walks home and he goes, he hates when I touch the electricity, and he goes, I'm gonna go to the grocery store and get something to make for dinner. That's the way it goes in our house sometimes. But one of the questions I asked was, tell me about what sort of life skills have you learned? Some of these responses were really great here. Yeah, let me find this. Well, I'm not gonna find it. And anyhow, lots of sorry. For what it's worth, here's what those. When I said I'd come back to this, what those people who responded to the survey said about should we send money. 25% agreed that we should send money. There was a lot of responses that said, but here's my but. Especially after years of time away, it seems that the mission trip is mostly beneficial for the people attending it. It's a life-changing journey where you believe you're making a difference and growing together. But at times I felt the work we were doing was shoddy and not going to help long term. I think that's one of the most important pieces to remember as we're doing this. Are 16-year-olds the best people to go out and to build a porch led by a 20 and 22-year-old who've never done this? Probably not. If there weren't people in the community who were able to do that, is it better that they tried than nobody doing it at all? Was the connection that we made with this man and the relationship that we formed and the fact that I can still remember his name 18 years later, does that matter? I think these are all questions that there isn't a concrete answer. But one of my guidelines is to always remember to make sure we're helping and not hurting, and we have the right people in the job. And in line with that, accompaniment ministry is the best model. So this is what we practice with our mission partners in Tanzania. It's a big part of the ELCA's global ministry, is this accompaniment ministry, where we walk alongside one another and we try to learn from one another, rather than it being the northern white church giving to the southern church around the world. And sometimes, actually always, it's really, really hard work to do. Because it's a lot easier to just go in with answers and expertise and money. It's a lot harder to go back and go back and go back and build relationships and learn from one another as we do this. One of the things I would love to see happen here is for us to develop some other mission partners like Kiambi Hospital who are closer, where it's more accessible for others in our congregation to travel and be a part of this relationship. Now, I don't know where that might be, but I think something powerful can happen when there's a partnership that develops and you're returning and you're learning a little bit more and you're intentionally meeting needs that the other people are identifying and also helping to identify the solutions and the ways to respond to that. So that's one of my takeaways of many questions for the last couple minutes here.
Lisa?
Yes.
Back to the money versus going.
Yeah.
You would want your money to be used, in a good way.
Right.
So you'd want to check that out and all that before you sent.
Yeah, right. And we don't know. Sometimes you don't know unless you're there or you have trusting relationships with someone. Yeah. Ben?
You can also sometimes disrupt the local economy if
Yeah.
you're sending money, and it causes people who have started businesses there to not be able
Yep.
to sell their goods.
Yeah, that's very true. We used to bring a lot of medical supplies with us to Tanzania. The government has made that hard to do. We also try to purchase as much as we can from the distributors in the country. Yeah. Other questions? Anything? All right. I'm supposed to end at 10:20, right? I think so. All right. Well, thank you for dealing with what appeared to now be an unorganized presentation that I promise you, if we had technology, wasn't. But thank you also for all the support that you give to missions here at Zumbro in countless ways by traveling or supporting those who have traveled over the years. I know many of you have done that in countless ways. So let us pray. God, thank you for this work that you call us to do. Help us to be good stewards of our resources. Help us to be good partners with those who you have placed us in this world with. Help us to learn from one another and discover where you are. Guide us as a congregation as we move forward and we hear your call to serve our neighbors. Amen.